Okay, good afternoon. So we are in the next class on research methodology, and we were in the stage of data collection, right? So we were discussing data collection, and we discussed last day the methods of data collection. Okay, the methods are there are basically two types of data collection methods: so primary data and secondary data. So we discussed primary data are those which are collected afresh for the first time, and thus happen to be original in character. Secondary data, on the other hand, are those which have already been collected by someone else and which have been already passed through statistical process. So there are two types, primary and secondary. So first we discuss what are the general methods of primary data collection. Definitely you know that it first is by doing experiments and for technical research and for performing surveys. So surveys, for what are the different methods of surveys? One is the observation method, interview method, through questionnaire, through schedules, and other methods. So we discussed that which data to be selected. We discussed each of them, right? We discussed primary data, secondary data, collection of primary data, doing experiment, performing surveys, different methods of surveys we discussed through observation, interview, questionnaire, schedules, right? And then which method to select for data collection, we discussed that it depends upon several factors like nature, scope, and object of inquiry, availability of funds, time factor, and precision. And then we discussed and we pointed out the guidelines for constructing or developing questionnaires or schedule, guidelines for successful interviewing, and the difference between survey and experiment. So we completed, means we did okay. So anyways, so we completed this up to this in the last class, and we will continue today with data collection with the case study method. We will discuss only case study method today. So what do we understand by this? It is a very popular form. So case study is a very popular form of qualitative analysis and involves a careful and complete observation of social unit. Be that unit a person, a family, an institution, a cultural group, or even an entire community. So in case study method, it's one of the popular form of qualitative data analysis. And what does it involve? It involves careful, complete observation of a social unit, be that unit a person, a family, an institution, a cultural group, or even the entire community. So this is what the case study method involves. Okay. So it is a method of study in depth rather than breadth. So case study methods is a method which studies in depth rather than breadth. So case study places more emphasis. So case study places more emphasis on the full analysis of limited number of events or conditions and their interrelations. So what does case study involves? The case study places more emphasis on the full analysis of a limited number of events or conditions and their interrelations. The case study deals with the processes that take place and their interrelationship. Thus, case study is essentially what it is essentially an intensive investigation of the particular unit under consideration. So case study is essentially an intensive investigation of a particular unit under consideration. The object of case study method is to locate the factors that account for the behavior patterns of given unit as an integrated totality. This is a formal definition. The case study method is a technique by which individual factor, whether it be an institution or just an episode in the life of an individual or group, is analyzed in its relationship to any other in the group. So it states what this definition states. The case study method is a technique. So it is a technique of by which individual factor. So this is technique by which the individual factor, whether it is an institution, the individual can be an institution, an episode in the life of an individual, or a group is analyzed in its relationship to any other in the group. Okay, so the case study method is widely used systematic field research technique in sociology these days. So it is most applicable in sociology, and it is a widely used method in sociology in this. The important characteristics. So what are the important characteristics of case study method? They are mentioned here one after the other. So first is under this method, one single social unit or more of such units are taken for study purpose. So in case study method, one single social unit or more of such units are taken for study purpose. So it can be, as we discussed last time, that it can be one single individual can be an episode or a single study, or it can be family or an institutional or cultural group, or even entire community. And what you do that in this one single unit or more of such unit are taken for study purpose. So such units in singular or plural are taken for study. Even a situation can be taken to study the same. Okay, so there was a message that the slide is not changing. So right now, please write whether the slide is changing. I'm just changing the slide. Please see whether it is changing or not. And please mention in the chat box whether it is changing or not. Or there is a live counter also going on. Okay. So we see in the other video that slide is changing. Sorry for this. For some reason, it got disconnected and we were missed how the slide was not changing. So we were discussing research methodology. We are discussing collection of data, and we discussed what are the different methods of data collection. Thank you. Somebody mentioned that slides are changing. Thanks for that. So we discussed last day, we discussed about primary data and secondary data. Okay. So primary data are the original or the novel or the first time collection of data. Second data are those which have already been collected by someone else and you are analyzing that. Okay. So we discussed what are the methods of primary data collection, so doing experiments and performing surveys, and what are the different methods of surveys we discussed, that is observation method, interview method, through questionnaires, through schedules, and we discussed all these points in details. And then what are the factors on which way to select your data collection? So the factors we discussed, what are the nature and scope, object of inquiry, availability of funds, time factor, and precision required, right? As similar, so you can understand. Every time we get similar, first is related to your study, so you cannot deviate too much. Fund availability, so it will depend, definitely your design to data collection, every depends upon the ability of funds. Time factor, you have to consider or squeeze into how much time it takes, because it cannot take too much time, because your research has to complete within the time frame required. And precision also is the one of the important factors which will depend which type of data collection you will go into. And the guidelines we discussed about construction, questionnaire, schedules, successive lecturing, and what a difference between survey and experiment. We discussed in detail last day. There is a lot of details actually. Those so much details are not required. So today, after this, there is another 3 classes for me. So what I will do in next class, I will try to half wind up, and then we will try to revise and do question answers. Okay. So that whatever assignments we were given, we'll discuss, so that you have a fair idea. Means you recap everything, and whatever you have gone through from the first class till now, we can just recap it, so that okay, you have a feeling and understanding, okay, what we have done in these classes, and you will have a better understanding and also better capability to write in your examination. So we'll discuss something related to assignments and try to discuss with the previous slides. Okay, from next class onwards. Next class we have small part left. We'll complete that and then we'll go ahead. Okay. So this is so we were discussing today the case study method. We have discussed what case study is. Case study is a study on a qualitative analysis, and it involves a social unit. Okay, so it's basically used in sociological research, sociology research. So it involves a social unit, and that social unit can be an individual, a family, an institution, a cultural group, or even a very big entire community, which can be the unit of your study, right? And what you do, you investigate on those units. It can be an individual unit or multiple units, and this by this case study technique, the individual factor, whether it is an episode or an institution, whatever the units, is analyzed in relationship to any other in that group, whatever you want to analyze. The case study method is widely used in systematic field research technique in sociology. Okay, so remember, so it's sociology, it's an important subject, and the important characteristics of case study method we are discussing, it can be a one social unit or more of such units, right? Are taken for study purpose. So you can take one unit or more of such units. First is one or more than one or more. This is first point, the characteristics of case study. Second is, here the selected unit is studied intensively. That is, what do you mean by intensively? It is studied in minute details. Generally, the study extends over a long period of time to ascertain the natural history of the unit, so as to obtain enough information for drawing correct inferences. So you have to draw some inference, or you have to draw some correlationship between units or factors within the unit. So you have to do an intensive study. So what do you mean by intensive study? A long period of time of data collection to ascertain that whatever factors or whatever data you are analyzing is subjected to a long time period. So the whatever inference you draw is correct, right? So this is the second form, that is, it's a intensive study, long time period. Third is, in the context of this method, we make complete study of social unit covering all facets. Through this method, we try to understand the complex of factors that are operating within a social unit as an integrated totality. So this is another important factor that you have to consider while doing case study method, or one of the characteristics of case study method is that we have to draw the interrelationship between complex factors operative within the unit. So we have to make a complete study of the social unit covering all facets. Okay, so you cover all facets of study, right? What is the fourth method? Under this method, the approach happens to be qualitative. So one of the important factors is that it happens to be a qualitative, or that is for sociology leaders, everything is more or less qualitative and not quantitative. Every possible effort is made to collect information concerning all aspects of life, right? So you gather qualitative data, and every possible effort is made to collect information concerning all aspects of life, right? What is the fifth? Is that in respect of case study method, an effort is made to know the mutual interrelationship of causal factors. So basically what you are doing in this kind of study, the main characteristics of case study is that you in that unit, the mutual interrelationships of causal factors you have to determine. And the case study methods, the behavior pattern, so behavior pattern, not a qualitative unit, a qualitative unit, not a quantitative unit, okay, of the concerning unit is studied directly and not by indirect or abstract approach. So it's a direct study. You directly go to the individual and collect the data, or the group or the institution, and not from indirect approach. Okay. Case study method results in fruitful hypothesis along with data, which may be helpful in testing them, and thus it enables the generalized knowledge to get richer and richer. In its absence, generalized social science may get handicapped. So in social science or in sociology research, you have to always do research including a case study, because if a sociology research is devoid of case study method, then the fruitful hypothesis correlating with the data will not be possible. Okay, so you have to go and do direct data collection from the individual units, which may be, as we discussed, an individual person, an institution, family, an episode, and so on, right? But there are assumptions. What are the assumptions? The assumption of uniformity in the basic human nature, in spite of the fact that human behavior may vary according to situations. So as we discussed, with time, we are definite that with time the human behavior is subjected to change, because with time the situation changes. So human behavior depends upon external factors. So if the external factors change, the human behavior is supposed to change, but we are assuming uniformity in basic human nature in spite of the fact the human behavior may vary according to situations. So this is a very big assumption, which is not correct, but still we are assuming that. The assumption of studying the natural history of the unit concerned, and the assumption of comprehensive study of the using concern. Okay, so the first one is a very large assumption which is not correct in the consideration that with time the basic human nature changes depending on the situation. Second is that what assumption? That studying the natural history of the unit concern, and the assumption of comprehensive study of the unit concern. But there are certain advantages. In spite of these assumptions, there are certain advantages with respect to sociology research. What are those? There are several advantages of case study method. One, being an exhaustive study, as we discussed in the characteristic that is the intensive study with a large time frame. Being an exhaustive study of a social unit, the case study method enables us to understand fully the behavior pattern of the concerned unit. So, okay. Second, what are the second advantage? Through case study, a researcher can obtain a real and enlightened record of personal experiences, which would reveal person's inner striving. So what you are doing a sociology research, right? So if you consider that the unit which you are studying is a person, and you do an exhaustive study, means intensive study with a long time frame, and you study the behavioral pattern. Okay. So once you study the behavior pattern, you infer about the person's inner strivings, tensions, and motivations that drive him her to action, along with the forces that direct him her to adopt a certain pattern of behavior. So basically, when if consider the simplest form of unit, that is a person's a case study on a individual, right? And you study the individual with time, and being an extensive study, you do a long long time frame study on the individual, on the behavior pattern. You study the situations under which his behavior pattern changes. By that, what you can infer? You can draw many inferences, like the person's inner strivings, tensions, under what conditions it become tense, what are the strivings, what are the motivations that drive him to act, and also why and under what situations he or she adopts a particular behavior pattern, anger or resentment. So a negative pattern or positive pattern, like joy or equanimity. So whatever the behavior pattern that person adopts and under what situations or what motivates him to do act in a certain way, that you can correlate. Like the factors you can correlate with the behavior, right? The external means the situations, the factors means the situations at which he behaves in what way, the motivations which drive him to act in a particular way. Okay, situations which forces him to act in a certain behavior. Okay, so these you will draw inference correctly through case study method for sociological research. Third, this method enables the researcher to trace out the natural history of social unit. So if we study the social unit of an institution, say, so what you can do, you can trace out the natural history of the social unit and its relationship with the social factors and the forces involved in its surrounding environment. Okay, so the institution is in the surrounding environment, and your study will help. Your case study on the institution will help you to draw out the natural history of the social unit and its relationship with social factors and the forces involved in its surrounding environment. Okay. What is the fourth advantage you can get through such case study method is that it helps in formulating relevant hypothesis. Okay, it helps in formulating the relevant hypothesis along with the data which may be helpful in testing them. So you propose hypothesis, okay, means suppose you take the case of a person. So the person behaves under this situation and you generalize this hypothesis, right? And also you mention about certain situation in which he had acted like that way, 3 situations. So those 3 are the data. Okay, so you in future, if this hypothesis has to be proven, what you can do, this data will help them, the future researcher, to subject the individual to the same situation and see whether it acts in the same way, whether the anger is generated. So it is useful in testing the hypothesis also. So the data or the case study method, case study data generated will help in such way. So case study does enable the generalized knowledge to get richer and richer. Okay. Fifth, the method facilitates intensive study of social units, which is generally not possible if we use either observation method or the method of collecting information through schedules. So we discussed last day about observation method and method of collecting information through schedules. But this case study method is different, and this method facilitates intensive study of social unit. And such study cannot be possible with observation or through schedules, right? You can understand because we understood what is observation or through schedules, what you can do. Schedules, you can send questionnaires and then you can get the replies. But such, if you do a case study with an institution directly, then your data are more rigorous, right? This is why what happens, this is the reason why case studies being frequently used, particularly in social researches, right? So this part we have understood in details. And lastly, the information collected under the case study method helps a lot to the researcher in the task of constructing the appropriate questionnaire schedule for the said task requires through knowledge of the concerning universe. Okay, this is a generalized statement. What are the advantages? Other advantages, the research can use one or more of the several research methods under the case study method depending upon the prevalent circumstance. Case study method has proved beneficial in determining the nature of units to be studied along with the nature of the universe. This is the reason why at times the case study method is alternately known as mode of organizing data. So why it is called mode of organizing data? Because case study methods have proved beneficial in determining the nature of units to be studied along with the nature of the universe. Okay, so you have the units and the other surroundings excepting the units. So that constitute the universe. Okay, so behavioral pattern depending upon some external factors. So external factors comes under outside the unit, and the unit is the behavior of the or the person. The unit is the person or the behavior of the person, and the universe is the surrounding or the environment in which the person is subjected to. Okay. The case study method, why the way it is advantageous is that it has proved beneficial in determining the nature of units to be studied along with the nature of the universe. So, under what nature of the universe a particular nature of a unit will behave. This is the reason why at times the case study method is alternatively known as mode of organizing data. Okay. This method is a means to well understand the past of a social unit. So it helps in, as we discussed several times, that history. With a case study method, you can determine the history of a social unit. It can be an institution or a person. Because of its emphasis on historical analysis, right? Besides, it is also a technique to suggest measures for improvement in the context of present environment. It's not only deals with history repeats itself, right? There is a turn. So history helps in also in the context of present environment. Case study method also studies the present environment, the history as well as the present environment, and it helps in predicting the future behavior pattern as well. Okay, the future data. So such type of research are very much beneficial because you can predict the social factors on which your unit will behave in whatever way. So case study constitutes a perfect type of sociological material as they represent a real record of personal experiences, which very often escape the attention of most of the skilled researchers using other techniques. If you use other techniques, indirect techniques, like we discussed that day, last day, instead of a case study method, you can miss some important factors on which a sociological research or the factors of sociological research will depend. Case study method enhances the experience of the researcher and thus in turn increases analyzing in ability and skill. This is true for any method. I think it means whatever research you do, if you continue doing research, your ability and skill is definitely to improve day by day. That is why after several years, a researcher becomes a supervisor, right? Its skills and ability improves, and that is why experience, what is called as experience, is what is helpful. This method makes possible the study of social changes. This method makes the study of social changes on account of minute study of different facets of social unit. The researcher can well understand the social change then and now. So past and present, all facets, as we discussed last time, that the characteristics that we offer so case study method is that all facets of the unit has to be researched upon. Okay, data collection on all facets. So if you do in such a way, in an extensive way on all facets, the researcher can well understand the social change, past and present, then and now. Okay. The case study techniques are indispensable for therapeutic and administrative purposes. They are also of immense value in taking decisions. It has very big value in taking decisions regarding several management problems. Right? Okay. So human resource management or any other management. So you taking decisions, it gives such kind of social case study gives immense value because such data are useful in taking decisions. What way the human resource has to implement the laws, right? Right. So we come to limitations. So what are the limitations of case study methods? We discuss one by one. So case study methods, case situations are seldom comparable, and as such, the information gathered in case studies is often not comparable. You have understood this, I feel that it is difficult to compare. The case data do not provide knowledge of the impersonal, universal, non-ethical, non-practical, repetitive aspects of phenomenon. real information is often not collected because the subjectivity of the researcher does not enter in the collection of information in a case study. The danger of false generation is always there in view of the fact there is no set rules are followed in collection of information and only few units are studied. It consumes more time. This is a very big disadvantage and requires a lot of expenditure. So from the point of view with whatever data collection we discussed last day, there are advantages in the point of view of time and expenditure, economics, but here it suffers. More time is needed under case study method since one studies the natural history cycles of social units and that too minutely. Case study method is based on several assumptions. So we discuss the assumptions, which may not be very realistic, definitely, and not realistic at all times. So it's not true. The assumptions are not valid throughout. Sometimes it is valid, sometimes it is invalid. So the data is subjected to questions, right, or doubts. The case study method can be used only in limited sphere. It is not possible to use it in cases of big society, right? The response of the investigator is an important limitation of the case study method. She often thinks that she has full knowledge of the unit and can answer about it. In case the same is not true, then consequences follow. In fact, this is more the fault of researcher rather than the case study method. So response of the investigator is an important limitation of case study method. So researcher, what happens? The investigator, he often thinks that he has full knowledge of the unit and can answer about it. In case the same is not true, then consequences follow. In fact, this is more fault of the researcher than that of the method. So we can omit this as a disadvantage of case study method. This is more of the investigator. So the general limitations are that limitations in comparability of data, non-practical repetitivity aspects of phenomena, false generation, time consuming and more expenditure. It contains certain assumptions which may be true or may not be true, and thus the data is subjected to doubt. And it is very difficult to collect data for big societies, right? So now we come into the final stages of data collection. What are the common challenges in data collection? Data collection is not without its challenges. Here are some common challenges faced during the process. Access to participants. Accessing the target population or participants can be challenging, especially in sensitive or hard to reach communities and organizations. So it is a very big challenge in sociological research that you may or may not have direct access to the participants. So in that case, if you do not have direct access, you fail to do a case study method. You have to follow other procedures, right? Again, if you follow other procedures, you may not get the response, right? So an access to the population or a sampling is one of the very big challenge in data collection for sociological research. Sample size and representativeness. Determining an appropriate sample size that is statistically significant and representative of the population of interest can be challenging, right? And even in this tells too in case of scientific research, right? So what is your appropriate sample size? So in data collection, the appropriate sample size, which is statistically significant or representative of population of interest, is very challenging. A small sample size or a biased sample size compromises the validity of this finding. This is very clear that if a sample size is small or you take a sample from a biased place. So for a sociological research, say the social behavior varies. So you have targeted a population, but the social behavior varies from north and south, east and west of the sample or of your region of interest. But you take out samples only from one corner, say from the western corner, and you neglect the other three, middle and the other east, north and south corners. So what will happen? The sample is subjected to bias, right? Bias means whatever behavioral pattern you will see from the one westmost corner, and it may be subjected to some extraneous variable in the west, and it may not be a good data collection for the whole population, right? It will be a good data only for the western sector. So like that, you have to be unbiased in sampling situation, and also a small sample size is not correct. Say for material research, we often see that you do material research, many people might be doing microscopy of samples, right? So there you have prepared a powder sample, or you have prepared some solid sample, say some electroplated sample or some deposited sample or some thin film, right? And you have a large thin film, like 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter is considered large. And you do the microscopic investigation at one point, right? Do you think that it is an unbiased sampling? No, it is a biased sampling, right? It does not give the general impression of your whole population unless and until you are sure that your method of thin film deposition is homogeneous, right? If it is heterogeneous, so the data collected from one end of the sample will be quite different from that collected from the other end. So whatever data you are collecting from one end will vary, right? It's true for a scientific research as well. So, and same for a small sample size, okay, or bias sample. It will compromise the validity of the findings. Next comes challenges data quality control. Ensuring consistent data quality across multiple data collectors or survey administrator sites can be difficult. Standardizing protocols, training data collectors, and conducting regular quality checks are essential to maintain data quality. So for sociological research work, these are very important points, right? For data quality control, how will one control the data? Are your data not foolproof? So you have to ensure that the data collected is consistent and more correct. So how you will ensure that? Ensuring consistent data quality across multiple data collectors or survey administrator sites can be very difficult. And this is one challenge, data collection. Standardizing protocols, training data collectors, and conducting regular quality checks are essential to maintain data quality. For example, say it's the same logic if we give to this microscopic equipment, means data collection. So you have prepared 3 samples and you are comparing the 3 samples. One sample you take data from one equipment with a particular operator. The second sample you give to a different institute, a different equipment and different operator. And the third, in the third conditions. Do you think the 3 data you can compare correctly? It will be difficult. I'm not telling that it will be totally erroneous, but it will be difficult to compare between those 3, and so it's a challenge, right? Similar is a challenge for such data quality control in sociological research, right? Time and resource constraint. So this is one important factor, that collecting data can be time consuming and resource intensive. Limited budgets, time constraints, or lack of personnel with the required expertise can pose challenges in collecting comprehensive and accurate data. Okay, the same is true for scientific research. You are subjected to time and resource constraints, right? You may not have available a microscope to you always. So you have to, you have to depend on certain availability to certain institute, or within your institute, certain collaborations. So it will be available only in certain amount of time. So this kind of constraints, resource, and also as time, budgets, those constraints, every researcher is subjected to. So data collection is subjected to time and resource constraints. Data collection is subjected to proper quality control. Data collection is subject to the challenge of sample size and representativeness. and data collection is subjected to the challenge of access to participants. So these are the 4 common challenges encountered for data collection. Next comes data recording and maintenance. So you have to, what you have to do, you have to record the data, right? You have collected and you have to record the data properly and maintain. The general purpose of data recording is to set in writing and assure the preservation of data collected in the course of laboratory studies. Importance of recording observation. You all know, you all have record book with page number. Okay, everybody. I always tell my students that please have a proper record book and page number, because after some time you are going to forget. I also forget. He or she will also forget, and so a proper record book and page number is a must for recording observations. Otherwise, there is a problem. Handwritten data, Microsoft Excel, Word, or audio clips. So importance of recording observations. Maintaining the records, record management and archiving. It is very important, record management and archiving. And if you do from the day one, it will be useful to you at the end, collecting, okay? Sample history, okay? Transparency in data recording. Data transparency is not merely a compliance requirement. It's a commitment to ethical practices and that foster trust and reliability in data. So the transparency in data recording has to be there. And this is very much stressed nowadays. So it's a very big ethical practice. So nowadays it is very big, pursued in a very rigorous way. Transparency, what it ensures? Transparency in data collection ensures that data is not only clear and open, but also comprehensible. It is about shedding light on how data is collected, processed, and used, right? So everything has to be transparent and properly recorded. And next, coming to data recording. So data recording, in research methodology, recording observations, maintaining accurate record, understanding sample history, and ensuring transparency in data recording are crucial, ensuring validity, reliability, and replicability of research finding, as we discussed in the last slide. Recording observation, maintaining records, sample history, and transparency in data record. These are the 4 points that you always have to remember. Okay. Okay, so recording observations. Observing and recording relevant data allows researcher to capture details and behavior that might be missed through other methods. It provides a direct first-hand account of the phenomenon under study, which decisions for quality research and certain quantitative investigation. So recording observations, you have to record for quantitative and qualitative investigations both. Maintaining the records. Proper record keeping involves proper documentations of all observations, data collection, methods, procedures, decisions made during research processes. So nowadays we have to submit that to the, if required, to the journals that okay, a proper record has been kept, and if required, we'll provide the data, right? The raw data as well. And any potential biases. This allows research to retrace their steps, replicate the study, and ensure transparency. It also is in communication and collaboration with other researchers. Okay. It will help you. Means if you maintain proper records, it will help. If you do not, there are people who are not maintaining proper records. It really becomes difficult to retrace the step, replicate the study, and ensure proper transparency. Sample history. Sample history refers to background information of the participants of study population. This includes details like previous experiences relevant to the research topic and its potential selection biases. So whether there was some bias in this, or properly if you write down, okay, I have taken the microscopic image throughout or on certain places. Underneath the sampling history is critical for interpreting the results accurately. It allows researchers to account for factors that might influence findings and avoid misinterpretation. So I feel it is well conveyed what we are meaning by this. What are the challenges? And these are 4 are very important points. And transparency in data record. Transparency in data record means clearly documenting how data was collected, stored, and analyzed. So this should be very transparent, and you should be very clear about this. Specifying the research methods used, the data collection tools employed, and any data cleaning or transformations performed, and thus analysis procedure used to draw conclusion. Transparency enhances trust in research processes and allows others to replicate and verify this is very important. Trust in research process and it helps in to replicate and verify the findings. So these are recording observations, maintaining records, sampling history, and data recording. These are very four important points in challenges in data recording. Okay. So we have key points to open: detailed constantly recording, data storage and security, and documentation. So these are the points to remember. Interpretation research we'll conclude today because time is up. We thought we'll start up this. Okay, we'll do from next class interpretation, finish it, and then from first class, whatever we did, module A 3 classes, and in module B, whatever classes we have done till now, we'll recap and discuss about some assignments so that it becomes easier to you to do during exams. Probably next class we'll try to do interpretation, and from the last two classes we'll do. Okay, thank you.